look back and see, well, where did we begin? So last June, you developed the budget for the year, and we had a certain set of assumptions. So, and on the general fund side, you can see those assumptions here. You know, we thought we were going to get a $241 per pupil foundation allowance increase. That was based on the governor's proposal. That was the best information that we had at the time. We projected losing 145 students. And then you can kind of see some of the other revenue changes as well. ESSER was going down and ending. Of course, that ended back in September, so we pulled, the lion's share of that had already been spent. So our total revenue was decreasing substantially. And then you can kind of see some of the other ones there. Same thing on the expenditure side. Using our magic 8-ball, right? We budgeted to reduce several positions. We knew we were going to have that at that time, but we used an estimate. We knew we had funded a portion of some teachers with our ESSER funding, so that the general fund had to pick that back up, so it was an increase in costs. And then you can see some of the other changes as well in there. So trying to make predictions for the new year when you are still finishing the old year, which is typical, right? It's what we do. But we also knew there were some changes that were coming, but we just didn't have any idea about, right? We had contract negotiations with all of our employee groups. So in that budget adoption, none of those changes were included because we were still in that process. We hadn't set up any contracts. We also didn't include any changes of non-teaching staffing levels. And then we know that for positions that we do replace for retirees, that there is a bit of savings. Sometimes that gap is shrinking, but there is some savings there. So none of that was built into the adopted budget. So now fast forward to where we're at for this year and this amendment. So the state adopted their budget, and we talked about it after they adopted it, that there was not a per pupil foundation allowance increase, so we are pulling that out for this budget amendment. We also have a decrease of 80 additional students for FTE, so there's an additional $700,000 in reduced revenue. Section 147A NIPSR, so that's money that the state has in there to help offset the cost of retirement. The A is just revenue coming in. Okay? That's one that's used to supporting existing costs. So that went up about $4.9 million with the budget with the State Aid Act at the state. But they also did at the same time is the other post-employment benefit side of the retirement program is fully funded. So their 147C, which was used to help pay that liability down, could be reduced. So that's why you see a reduction of $4 million there. The C is the in and the out. So they give us the revenue, and we have to turn around and we pay the invoice like the next day when we receive the actual revenue. We also have an increase in our transfer category. It's a weird category that they call transfers, but this is money, in this case, that's coming from the Kent Intermediate School District, or KASD. There are a couple points that I'm highlighting from that. So that's our Act 18. So that's our county special ed millage. So property owners across our county are paying into that, and then that goes to the ISD, and then they allocate that out to the local districts to help support the cost of special education programming. The ISD also operates special ed transportation for Forest Hills and a number of districts in our county on behalf of the districts, and so the reimbursement that they receive for that, we pay the bill. There's additional revenue that comes in, so they pay that back to the districts. So that went up a little bit. And then with all those changes with retirement and some additional reimbursement, the ISD had received some reimbursement related to our itinerants. So think our social workers, our speech paths, and the like. They last year were employees of the ISD, and we did a bill back model. This year they've returned to Forest Hills. They're now just underneath our umbrella, Well, the ISD got the revenue for that last year, so they pushed that back to the locals. So that's a part of that $700,000. We also have an increase in some grants. There's a variety of them increase, but I've highlighted a couple of them here. It's a total of 1.7 million, but our Section 35J grant related to literacy, and our Section 31A, we have some carryover funding for that. Those are two of the bigger ones that comprise of the $1.7 million. Interest income continues to trend a little bit higher, so we're just reflecting a bump up there. Our recreation millage, so that is levied on all properties in the district, that is higher because our property values are higher. We have budgeted a slight increase in the adopted budget, but we're trending a little bit more with that, so that's about $354,000. And then because of enrollment and our change in enrollment, there's some state funding called enrollment stabilization that comes through a monthly state aid report. That went up a little bit, so we're recognizing that just shy of $400,000 for that. So those are the major revenue changes on the general fund side. And then on the expenditure side, the largest one obviously is our contract settlements, right? We, as a board, you authorized all of those when you, over the course of the summer. We have some additional teaching position reductions. You have that information in your packet here. It spells out between elementary, middle, and high. And then that turnover savings I talked about earlier, when we know a retiree is leaving, but we are filling that position, that difference between the person who's filling the position and the cost of retiree. So all that together is an increase of cost of about $4.5 million. We also are seeing an increase in cost related to our building management software that comes out of Corey's department. We're behind in updating that software, and so we are playing a little bit of catch up and getting us to where we need to be, and then giving us a little bit of buffer for a few years. So that plus utilities is increasing about $170,000 as we're estimating. And then I know Ben has talked about doing some program evaluations for the district, some organizational learning, our overall professional development, and then my favorite, the GASB 96 subscriptions, and that's the multi-year subscriptions for whatever it is. It could be related to our online for curriculum, it can be technology, whatever it is that's multi-year. Tina and I are trying to do a better job of making sure we're reporting that throughout the year. So those, that group together is about $156,000. Here's the expenditure side of the grants. Remember, grants are neutral to our bottom line, revenue and expense equal. So there's the 1.7, and then you see the 147C here. All right, so I highlighted kind of the narrative side of it. So here's what it looks like for revenue in the big buckets, right? Local, state, federal, and incoming transfers and other. So our adopted budget was a little over $131.5 million. And with this budget amendment, that takes us to about $132.8 million, and all those things that we talked about. Those are the major ones. And there's a lot of little ones that go up and down because we have a gazillion account numbers that we have to use to make sure we're in compliance with the state accounting manual. But you can see that change in the revenue. And I like to put the percentages so you can kind of see the changes. With our property values going up, we're bringing in more on the operating millage side, so that means the state portion goes down a little bit. So sometimes that's what you'll see in that shift between local and state as well. And then on the expenditure side, same thing. Our bottom line for that was a little over $133 million, what we adopted back in June. And so we're recommending just shy of $136 million, and we just talked through the why behind that and some of the high level changes for that. So what does it mean for our grand total bottom line and our fund balance? So the adopted budget, you can see that on the left. Now back in June, you adopted the fund balance at July 1 wasn't the $24.4 million, but we know that's what our July 1 balance is from our audited financial statement. So I've just dropped that in here because it's a better comparison. Doesn't look so drastic. So, currently we were, with the adopted budget, we're at $22.9 million ending in June 30. With this adoption, or with this amendment rather, we would be at about $21.4 million. So it looks a little bit better than what we anticipated, right, when we were going through and looking at projections and talking about negotiations. Certainly ending the fiscal year the way we did is a little bit better. Having additional positions that we were able to reduce and not necessarily replace has helped us as well. I'm going to pause for a minute for the general fund for this. I also threw this in here. I think I started doing this last year, just to give you an idea, because those are big numbers, right? That expense, $130 million, and we have to record things in two different categories. The level you adopt it at is typically what we call the function level. So is it instruction? Is it pupil support, which is like your counselors or social workers? Is it business services? Is it operations? That's what we call the function. But the other side of it is what's the type of expense? Is it a salary? Is it a supply? Is it a purchase service? And purchase service can be like our substitute teachers are a purchase service, right? So it's nice to look at this in a pie graph to say, okay, we know on our amended budget we're just shy of $136 million. What's that mean on the type of expenditures? Well, you look at salaries and benefits together, that's about 84%. So about 84% of our $136 million is spent on people. We're in the people business. So that kind of makes sense. And it's been around anywhere from, it stayed in the low 80s. I'm not sure I've seen it too much higher than mid 80s, but that's where we're at with this amendment. Supplies and materials is only around 8%, and purchase services around 7.6%. All right, and then I'll go a little faster here through our special revenue fund, but kind of that same concept. The special revenue fund includes our food service, child care, and our student and school activities funds within that. So the same concept, right? We had some assumptions that we built the budget on back in June, and you can see that much more condensed here across each of those. But we're recommending an amendment for them as well. We are not changing the student and school activity fund at this time. We're only recommending adjustments to our food service and our child care. But on the revenue side, our commodities revenue is increasing. We're using that a little bit more, so we get a little additional revenue for that. And the state reimbursement, so that's the Michigan School Meals Program, free meals for all. Just our trend is a little bit higher. So those two together are $200,000. Pulling down our catering and our a la carte sales, a little bit of interest income reduction. And then on the expense side, same for them, right? We're recognizing those contract settlements. So we've got those changes in here as well. Food costs continue to decline. So that's a big change in our food service program. But we know we need to spend down that fund balance because we have more than that 3 months requirement in there, or 3-month cap rather. Last slide, I promise for this one. So this is them in total. So our total revenue for the special revenue fund at adoption was a little over $9 million, and we're recommending a little under 9.3 for this amendment. And then you can see the expenditure there. So bottom line, not a big change for them. The bulk of that change is on the food service side, related to use a little bit more fund balance. And again, we need to do that. We're required to get that down. That's a lot. That's a budget amount. What questions do you have?
Question I have is, does any of this reflect, and it might not because I'm not sure what the status is, what's going on in Lansing with the 80/20 and the hard cap and those types of changes?
Great question. It does not.
Okay.
So this is status quo related to PA 152 and the district's ceiling on what we can pay related to medical insurance for all of employees. You're right, there was some bills that were passed, House Bill 6058, passed. That has not been sent to the governor for signature yet. And so we're starting to run those numbers to see what that looks like, because it's really changed from a ceiling to a floor. So that is not reflected in this, so this could be a big impact. There's some nuances of that, so we're starting to work through what does that look like, because there's language about 80% and the cap, and it's kind of what's greater, but it's the district's total cost and not necessarily each plan. We have a number of plans that our employee groups can choose from related to their medical insurance. So it's kind of working through all that. That is not in there, and it could be substantial. Early estimates were around $80, $85 per pupil.
Yeah.
So that could be big. All right, you've got your packet. Lots of things to digest from what you've heard today. Crystal put this presentation out there. Your packet has the same information plus a lot of the historical information. Reach out before Monday's meeting with what questions you might have for that. Okay? All right. My throat's dry, Ben. I'm turning it over to